What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones, on social media at Rich Q on Q, Twitter, IG, YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. And we finally have tracked him down, the incomparable, the sharpest of sharps, our guy, Shine the Prof, at Professor Shine. By the way, our Tuesday edition from our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clements Bridge Road, Deptford, New Jersey, 7 days a week. Check them out. They pay cash for good used items. It's the only place that I shop. We are ready for March Madness. He's locked in. He is locked in right now, checking out the brackets, how he's going to put coin in our pocket. Prop, what's going on?
Hey, how are you, Richie? Good to talk to you again.
You too, my friend. It's you're a great follow on Twitter. We love that you call out the BS and you troll, but you also give up some really good betting and gambling advice. All right, so you are what we would say beyond a novice. You're almost that level of expertise, so to speak. You know all the angles. What is your philosophy when you're betting and you're looking at the bracket for March Madness?
It's detailed, but I try to. There's a couple things I do. Like I follow all season. I bet college basketball all season. And what's important, the most important thing to note about the tournament is don't try to make sense of the at-large teams. The at-large teams, I mean, this is basically a invitational tournament after the automatic bids. So that's why sometimes you'll have, 10 seeds that are favored over 7 seeds.
Yep.
And you say, well, I thought the seedings meant the team was better. It really doesn't, because we don't know what the committee is using as metrics.
Yeah.
In a sense, they're guessing. And a lot of the criticism in the past about them is that they're guessing on the money side. So that's why Duke has gotten the benefit of the doubt years past. North Carolina, Kentucky, they've gotten the money teams. You remember a few years back, that Wichita State team that was great, that was undefeated, and Kentucky had a strange year with all NBA talent, and they stuck Kentucky as an 8 seed when they really could have been a 5 seed.
Yes.
And to set up that Wichita State, that 1-8, which Wichita State lost close, and it's outside of college basketball fans. It's a team that was forgotten, and it's one of the best mid-major teams that probably ever played. But it's, if you know that going into, the committee's going to kind of do strange things like that, or that it's not an indicative of how good a team is based on their seeding, you kind of have an advantage. So if you have your own power ratings, or you have certain teams listed of where you think they should be, and you see them pop up as a 7 seed like Texas A&M did this year, that the committee most likely made a mistake.
It's a very fair point you bring up, and it's funny too, because you can look at some of the last 4 that were out, and then some of the last 4 that were in, like the consensus opinion was, Rutgers got snubbed. Well, listen, 10-10 in conference play, 6 of 8 losses down the stretch. UNC, all right, look at their record. Not bad losses, not great wins. I look at Oklahoma State. I thought Clemson, and I know you're a hoops guy and you're a hoops junkie. I think any other year, you look at Clemson, 23-10, 14-6 in conference play. Granted, they lost to a bad Louisville squad that was 4-28. Any other year, Clemson's getting in, right? You can make the argument Rutgers is better than Nevada, but Nevada is going to have an opportunity to advance with the play-in game. So were you okay with those last 4 that were out, or from a betting standpoint, would you have preferred those teams to get in?
I have a little bit of a bias. I want to see Rutgers get in, just because I've got to see them a little bit more, simply because they're easy to watch. Anybody in the East Coast is a little bit easier to watch than it is Nevada, although I do stay up late and watch all the crazy teams, Montana State and things like that, just because I don't sleep that much. But I wanted to see Rutgers get in, because I thought early in the year they had some good wins. I mean, they beat Purdue.
Yep.
They beat Penn State. They beat Northwestern. I mean, they beat Maryland. I know they had injuries. The toughest loss I guess they had was they lost to Minnesota. and probably can't lose to Minnesota. And then you mentioned Clemson's loss to Louisville. It's like the committee almost counts those twice. If you beat a good team, or a team that they end up seeding 1 through 4, but if you lose to a 4-23 team, it's almost like they really hammer you. Like as if you look at Temple, I knew Temple had no shot getting in, but you look at Temple beat Houston, but they lost them to Wagner this year, earlier in the year.
Right.
They lost to Penn by 20. I knew Penn's not terrible. They lost to Maryland, Baltimore County. So do those 3 losses count? One win versus Houston? Probably the bad loss almost sticks out more than the good win. I usually don't get overwrought with the teams that shouldn't have made it, especially if they're in the big conferences. So Clemson, I don't cry too many tears about. There was a few years back where King Rice's team here in Jersey, Monmouth, it was a few years back, and they did everything possible. They played on the road and they lost close games. And it's before the committee really took it into account metrics. They did everything a mid-major should do, and they still didn't get in.
Right.
And the message was basically like, hey, you go schedule Wisconsin, you go schedule UCLA and Notre Dame, and you win a couple of these games, you still might not get in. I thought that was a bad message, because I think there should be more mid-majors in, because let's face it, they're not going to win the tournament. I'm even for expanding the tournament for more playing games and limiting them to only mid-majors.
I was going to ask you that.
Pierre said to me, how big do you want the tournament to be? I said, well, think about it. You're not going to get, for every Loyola getting to the Final Four, George Mason, that's twice every 25 years. You're not going to get
ECUs of the world. Yeah.
I remember Zerbiak's team years back. He made the Sweet 16. That's all anybody paid attention to.
Yep.
So, I think it's good when those teams make runs to the Sweet 16. If they get to the Elite Eight, that's great. But they very rarely win. It's still going to be the Blue Bloods. Blue Bloods are the 1 and 2 seeds. They're going to get in. So I don't cry too many tears for Rutgers or Clemson. I guess that's the point.
No, I get you. And I think sometimes too, let's be honest, right? They want to see what you're going to do in the conference tournaments and how you end the season. Oklahoma State, I think they were a victim of a loaded Big 12, and they lost 5 out of 6. They didn't really
That's a good point. Yeah.
They didn't have a ton of impressive wins. And so now you're on the outside looking at, North Carolina is a joke. Are you freaking kidding me? Consensus number 1 preseason, you're number 1. Then all of a sudden you go through a bad stretch, a bad season, and now you decline an invite to the NIT. You got to, snub your nose at college hoops. Go ahead.
I would have loved to see them force them to play like a playing game. Nobody wanted to see them in, but I would love to see them play a playing game and make them go real far, and then have a stacked bracket,
speaking of which, I think I'm looking at, and I pulled the brackets in front of me. Kansas, man, that West region it's pretty loaded, man. St. Mary's, VCU, Arkansas, Illinois. You got that dreaded 8-9 matchup. You got UConn. I love this, right? Everyone now jumping on UConn, and I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. What about Iona and Rick Pitino? Or is that more of Pitino's squad's going to be distracted? You got TCU, Gonzaga, UCLA. That's a tough, man. That West side that's pretty tough, man.
I think that was purposely done, and I think actually they got that right, because if there was there were no arguments with the 1 seed, but Kansas could have been a 2 seed, UCLA could have been the 1 seed.
Yeah.
But you're splitting hairs, just like years back when St. Joe's got they ran 28-1 or 27-1, and they got the 2 seed. No, they got the 1 seed. Oklahoma State got the 2 seed. Who cares? 1 or 2, it's not that big a deal. But I do think Kansas for a 1 is a little overrated. And then you see they're in that bracket. They're in the West, where they're all going to have to play each other.
Yes.
Anyway, actually, I'm hearing a lot. You're going to ask me this next about Duke. You're hearing that Duke for years was seated, too high. They were getting gift 3s and gift 4s.
East Regional.
They really didn't deserve it. And now people are saying, well, 5 is too high for them. or too low, depending on which way you're going. It's the 5 seed's no good. They should have a better seed than 5. But all that really means is that they're going to play a 12 in the next round instead of the 15 or 16. Does that make that much of it? The 12s obviously are a lot better.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when you get a 2, you're pretty much cakewalking to the
12
the
and 5
16.
is the matchup. We always say there's an upset brewing. 12 and 5.
Sure, but you know, Duke peaked late. They played great late, but they didn't play like a 1 or 2 seed the entire year. Should they have been a 3 or 4? I wouldn't have said anything if they were a 3 or 4. The interesting part is I've actually seen Oral Roberts a couple times play, and everybody's looked at their numbers. They have one really good player, and they can score. Which that's going to be one of my plays. Is if it hasn't been hit yet, I believe it has. I was going to play. For one of the first things I looked at in this game was over. But if you look at the line, you know the line's only 6. They're only a money line. Duke is only between 275 and 3. DraftKings has them at 3-1. Bookmaker has them at minus 275 against Oral Bob. Of course, that's what we're talking about. But that's kind of a short line for a 5-12, and for a game. I mean, for a team that everybody's saying, you know, Duke should be, you know, a 2 or a 3.
Yeah. Yeah. And they probably look at that game thinking that Duke's, you know, 10 to 15 points better.
Tells you something that it's only 6. I mean, and you know, they're across the board now. It's not Monday. You know, it's not Sunday night. They're taking some decent wagers. Places like Circa, Las Vegas, and you know, offshore they're taking bets. So it's not like that line is completely wrong. You know, you have to respect that maybe Roberts has it, you know, really that line telling you Roberts has a shot in that game, as opposed to, you know, you look at, you know, some of the analysts were talking about Colgate, Texas.
Yep. And
that line's come down, but, you know, Texas is 14. It's a different ball game a little bit, you know, 12 or 14. It means you probably have a team that's not going to win the game in Colgate. But when you look at Oral Roberts, you get a 5 or 6 point. Those teams lose those teams win, you know, a good amount of the time, 35%.
Yeah. And it's almost like when you start to try to handicap these 8-9 matchups, I mean, it's a coin flip. It's a 50-50. And I think sometimes the lines justify that, like Memphis, FAU, Arkansas, Illinois, Iowa, Auburn. I think Maryland, West Virginia, right? I mean, West Virginia, we know they live and die by the 3-point shot. If they're 3-point shot, if they're not shooting from the outside, I mean, they're in trouble, right? And then there's other teams that, you know, this predominantly guard heavy, right? And you look at the UCLAs, the USCs, the Houstons, the guard heavy teams are the ones I always look at come March Madness. But I'll say this,
especially, you know, you're right. It's been, you know, since back the first year with the 3-point line, back Steve Alford, all the way through the 90s, you're a guard, you know, through the lethal weapon 390s with Kenny Anderson, all the way. If you have good guards and they get hot, I mean, look out. They can carry you all the way through. It's definitely important.
Tuesday edition of BYP Shine the Prof, checking in with us. Rich Quinones here at Professor Shine. And again, we're brought to you by our wonderful friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemensbridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. Open 7 days a week. They pay cash for good used items. You got so many old school jerseys as well. Check them out online. Stop by the store. I have, when I looked at the bracket, and I think you might know where I'm going with this. There's always that one team you say, man, they are going to be either friggin' 1 and done or 2 and done. And to me, I hate to say it because I really love the big man, but I look at Purdue and you talk about a one-dimensional team. You shut down that center and they're in trouble. And I can see them getting bounced in the second round. Like they'll get past the playing game, relatively easy, but then that 8-9 winner, I think they might be in trouble. And even if they get by them, eventually, can I see them beating a team like Duke? I cannot.
It's a fair point. there's always a couple of these top seeds that you really kind of want to look at to fade. Gonzaga seems to be like the talk of like, hey, let's fade Gonzaga. I think last year was the year to fade them, and I think this year they're underseeded a little bit. They could have been the 2 seed. But to your point, I think Purdue is ripe to lose. If not the second round game, they could lose the Sweet 16 game. I don't see them making a deep run. All the top seeds can't make a deep run.
No.
And it's the consensus is that Alabama is going to make a deep run. I'm not even too sure about that. But if I have to take a look at the top eight seeds, I don't like. I agree with you. I don't like Purdue at all to make a deep run, because I don't like it. Like you said, when you have one bad player who can go sideways.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the Big Ten either, especially this year or whatever they are, the Big 12. I was going to call them the Big 10, whatever. But the outside of that run, 5-6 years ago when Wisconsin had the good teams, I didn't even like that team that much, but they proved me wrong and they went all the way to the championship game. But I'm not in love with
How about
Purdue.
Michigan State?
I do think I know 5 straight years one seed have won it all, but this is a wide open year. I'm not saying a 12 seed can win it all, but I would not be surprised if a 5 or 6 seed won it all.
Wow.
Or gets to the Final Four. Because, I think the goal is to get to the Final Four, because anything can happen from there. Bounces, a go funny. It's only one game. I don't think people should be punished if they get to the Final Four and they don't win the whole thing, especially if you're the favorite.
But Baylor, to me, I think anything short of a Final Four appearance is a major disappointment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No.
Purdue. Anything,
Yeah, I knew you meant Purdue.
Pardon me. Anything short.
I knew you
I've
meant
been saying
Purdue.
it for a month now. Yeah. I mean, Baylor 3 seed, that'd be a great run, but Purdue, anything short.
If Purdue gets to that Elite 8 game and they lose in overtime, maybe, but I think you have to get to the Final Four.
Yeah,
if
agreed.
you're that team, you have to get to the Final Four.
So you're looking at some of these lines, right? Creighton, North Carolina State, I think that's in at 4.5, 5. You got Mizzou, Utah State. I'm starting to see a lot of people think consensus Utah State is the game to pick, the team to pick in that one. It looks like they're the odds-on favorite. I don't know what line you might have flashing in front of you, but how about from that South region? Do you see any games you like?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Utah State, because that's their coach is the guy who coached Maryland, Baltimore County that upset Virginia. He's I can't remember his name, but he's their coach. He's been at Utah State a couple of years. I actually thought he'd be a good choice for Temple to coach Temple. If not him, I like Speedy Claxton coaches Hofstra. I like him also. But since we're talking about that region, I think Utah State can win one game. I've seen them play a few times. Of course, watching them play isn't as important as seeing their overall numbers. Again, sometimes I just watch some of these West Coast teams because there's nothing else on TV.
You were talking about Ryan Odom.
Oh, yes, Ryan Odom. Yes.
Ryan, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you like them?
I'm not. Well, I like him as a team. I don't like this particular matchup. As strange as it sounds, it's just this is really. I was hoping they'd get it. They'd get a different matchup. Like I like Kent State's matchup in the other region. So against Indiana, I think Kent State's actually a better team than Indiana.
Very good defensive team. I know they haven't had a tournament win since 2002. Back in the tournament since 2017. What is that? 4.5.
Yeah, I mean, I like them to win the game. I know I'm jumping around regions.
No. That's hey, man.
South.
Anything to put the coin in the pocket, we're okay.
It's hard to nail everything. I actually like Arizona to win the South. They've flown completely under the radar. Alabama's a really good team, but I can see them losing in the Elite 8 to Arizona.
I like Arizona because of their guards and they play perimeter defense and they're well coached. And those are things that I look at.
They're a good team. It's one of these things that they remember the Lute Olson years, they'd either made deep runs or they got bounced early. They had this kind of herky-jerky reputation in the tournament. And of course, Sean Miller was there and, they made some really deep runs. And then, all the problems they had there with with recruiting and everything. It's kind of, they're a little bit forgotten, especially with UCLA's resurgence. People are paying more attention to UCLA, and with good reason. UCLA is good, but I think you don't sleep on Arizona. They can win 4 games and get out of this region. The question really is, will they? Like, who do you really think? I do think Arizona is a short dog. If you could get 4-1 for Arizona to come out of the South, I think it's a good number. I just want to digress a little bit to Duke, because Duke's number to come out of the East is really all over the place. Because I wanted to mention this because it's part of my notes. I say it's all over the place. You can get as high as 8-1 for Duke to win the East. And some places it's as low as 475, plus 475. That's kind of wide for a 5 seed and for Duke. So that means there is some value. If you can get Duke plus 8-1, I think there's some value for them to come out of the East. I also think there's some value, believe it or not, in Memphis. I have a 17-1 for Memphis. Remember Memphis last year romped in the first game. I think they beat Boise. And then they played Gonzaga really, really well.
They played.
And I had Memphis in a pool. I had Memphis, and I actually were looking through sometimes you enter too many pools, you forget who you have. And I'm like, wait a minute. I said, oh, wait a minute. I have Memphis, and I forgot they're playing Gonzaga in the second round. So I kind of made a little bit of a mistake. But I said, you know what? Gonzaga could lose this game, if you remember, that was a really close game.
Tight game.
This is a decent team, and I was almost wish they didn't crush Houston, because now everybody kind of paid attention to it. But now when I see 17-1 to come out of the region, maybe not. Because think about it, you win 2 games, those odds. Now what do you have to do? You win the first 2. Everyone's going to pay attention to them
because Sweet 16.
You're almost free rolling with the 17-1.
But so Memphis is only laying 2 against Florida Atlantic. That's a lot of respect for Florida Atlantic. Remember, they had that ridiculous, I think it was like 19-game winning streak during the season. And
this is my only problem with Memphis. I hate to take both sides, but it's like I wish Memphis played anybody else besides Florida Atlantic, because Florida Atlantic is a really underrated team. And it stinks that one of these 2 teams has to lose that particular game. But yeah, it was 19. I thought it was 20, but you're right. It's 19.
They had a ridiculous stretch. I mean, they only lost to UAB, and I think they lost to Middle Tennessee State, and that was by 4.
Yes.
And they reeled off another 9-10 wins in a row. 31. I mean, how many teams won 31 games this year? Right?
Yeah, I don't care what conference you're playing in. If you win that many games.
So you still like Memphis still laying the 2?
I do like Memphis in the game, but it's a shame because it's going to be one of those deals where you wish somebody didn't have to lose the game. Actually, if Florida Atlantic makes the upset and beats, it's a small upset.
Sure.
I would take a long look at them for the next game as well, because they're still going to fly under the radar, and depending what their matchup is, they have a shot to hang really with anybody in the East.
Well, that would be Purdue. Let's just go by the assumption they beat.
There you go.
Yeah.
Actually, in my one major bracket, I had Memphis beating Purdue, but I would not be surprised if Florida Atlantic beat Purdue, and you'll get a decent number.
What do you shop around a lot when you're? I mean, how much do?
Yeah.
How much?
Well, there's a couple things. It's just sometimes I'll shop. A lot of the books collude. books like FanDuel and DraftKings, they watch what offshore does, and they make sure they're not too far off. But futures are a little bit of a different game. Sometimes you can get some value on that, but the individual game, point matters. A half point matters. Look at Patino's Iona. It opened 9.5. It was 9.5. They were plus 9.5 for a good, I'm going to say 2.5 hours, maybe an hour, maybe. Since daylight savings screwed me off, but they were 9.5 for a while, and then somebody hit Iona when it was at the lower opening limits, and it's 8.5.
Yeah.
And this is definitely a game where 8.5 and 9.5 is a big is a distinct difference. Not that 3 and 4 isn't, not that 2 to 2.5 to 4.5 isn't a big, but you can just see that's the kind of game Iona could stay in it. And then, depending on how many games I've lost where I had a team +7 and they just keep failing.
Get to the line or the BS 3-pointer. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not the keyest of key numbers, but my overall point is, I think it's important if you can get a 9.5 over an 8.5, or, back to the Texas Colgate. If you like Colgate, you want that 14, and that did not hang around long. I like Texas, so I kind of waited. And I think Baylor was another good example. Baylor opened 10, and I believe now it's 11.5. I checked an hour ago or so, but it's definitely 11. And that's definitely a difference, because the inverse of what we just said, they're going to be sitting there 74, 67, and you're like, make your foul shots, that kind of thing. You don't want to be in that position where you got 11 when you could have got 10.
Now, yeah, you're right. Listen, it's that you take the point either way. However, it can give you the advantage. Will you in-game live bet during the tournament?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Will you in-game live bet during the tournament?
Yeah, I will, especially if I've missed a good number. You kind of want, there's so many. If you watch enough basketball, it's a game of runs, especially if it's two close teams. Very rarely do you see what happened. We'll bring up the Houston game in the championship, where you thought maybe they would be able to come back. And then if you missed a good number on the dog, then you could grab it again. But they didn't. Houston got down, and they knew the game didn't mean anything.
Right.
I don't know if the coaches told them or whatever. They said, "Listen, let's just coast." And once they got down, they never came back up. But in a normal game situation, if you miss that +5 or +6 or +6.5, and that dog comes out and is up 10 or 12 in the first 8 minutes, I've played back the other side. Just because there's value in it, you kind of know that it's not the other team's not gonna run away and hide. That's a very nuanced thing. In game, the limits are not as they don't take as much in-game play action as they would second half. So sometimes you can wait and say, okay, let's see what the second half is. But if you're shopping early, you shouldn't really get stuck maybe in that situation. Sometimes I have, just because of I make mistakes like everybody.
You want to hedge a little. How about the playing games tonight? Southeast Missouri State, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, Pittsburgh, Mississippi State. Anything?
I had a small play on A&M Corpus Christi. All four teams are really tough to gauge. When you get past like the 220 and KenPom ratings or whatever, they're pretty much similar teams. I have a soft spot for Corpus Christi, just because I knew a previous administration. I kind of knew their vaguely their coaching staff, and I think it's an undervalued university in general. People don't realize that's on an island.
Yes.
It's So if you ever have a kid who kind of wants to go to college, maybe have them take a look at Corpus Christi. You know, people years ago used to say Pepperdine.
That's
You know,
right.
I look at Pepperdine. I remember Paul Westphal ended up.
Yeah.
People are like, why is Paul Westphal not in the NBA? It was because
Right.
he's coaching at Pepperdine. You know, have you seen the campus? It's in there.
Pepperdine team that was up by 10, I think, against Valvano's Wolfpack.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
They went cold from the line.
Yeah, in the 80s, they had everyone, you know, every once in a while they could remember Doug Christie went there.
Of course.
You know, Doug Christie went there. And you know, but you kind of see some of these places. Remember Florida Gulf Coast made that run. You know, and everybody's like, oh, where's Florida Gulf Coast? Florida Gulf Coast is in Fort Myers. You know, it's another kind of an undervalued campus, but not that has anything to do with handicapping, but if it's, I had a little bit of an edge, but it really is that it's a coin flip game. I kind of had like I've kind of been trying to I kind of have my own metrics to look at, and then whatever pops up. Sometimes it's with the market, and sometimes it's against. I have, you know, from the beginning, it's going to be a popular play no matter what. As soon as the lines popped out, I liked Kent State, and I like St. Mary's, and the market disagrees with me a little bit. Market meaning, you know, people smarter than I, but I think I have St. Mary's at, you know, roughly 5-point favorite, a little bit more than 5 over VCU, and you could get 3.5. It opened 4, and I think they are. Well, there's a few things. If you know, every game matters in the regular season. You know, people don't realize that, or they don't. But at least I think every game matters, and unless somebody gets hurt, I kind of count all the games pretty much equally. So my point being is I don't. St. Mary's getting woodshedded to Gonzaga in the championship game.
Means
that's okay. I mean, the line was really close. It was like 2 or 3, and to lose by like 150 kind of makes your team look bad.
Sure.
But St. Mary's is a good team, and it would be a shame if they don't come out and prove it against VCU. VCU is good, but I don't think they're on the same level.
And that's your 12. And that's your 12-5 matchup. Yep, and that's your 12-5 matchup. All right, so a couple more before I let you get out of here, and then I want to get some NFL thoughts. Again, Tuesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. Rich Quinones here. Professor Shine, kind enough to join us. Our Tuesday spot from our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemensford Road, Deptford, New Jersey. Pay cash for good used items. You mentioned a little bit tonight with some of these games. Do you have an official Final Four prediction?
I didn't make an official one, believe it or not. In my pools, I had UCLA. I did. My main pool was a little chalky, if I'm not mistaken, but it was. I did have Duke, as it kills me because I've never been a Duke fan. So you know, if I have Duke,
Okay, this might be
I really like them.
This might be the death taxes and Duke in the
yeah, it's like
here. It might be.
You know, they're in the East. You know, what was that old thing? You know, Senchashevsky West, he never gets out because you don't know the refs. You know, it was like the old thing. But I do think Duke is going to come out of the East. I have Arizona in the South.
Mm-hmm.
The West, I did not have. Is UCLA. I have UCLA. In the West, and I took now last year I had Houston. Last year Houston made the Final Four, right? Yeah, Houston last year. They shot really poorly the one game in the league, and they came back. Yeah, so I had Houston.
Yep.
It was really to squeak in, you know, and I think it escapes me because I think I consider myself lucky. I had a pretty substantial bet on Houston to make the Final Four. I had good odds. but you know, their odds are very short to come out of the Midwest. And but I went with Texas. I have a you know, a lot of people don't like Barnes. I've been kind of, you know, lukewarm with him over the years, but I feel like I have to root for Texas. I got a decent number on Texas, believe it or not, about 6 weeks ago.
Okay.
And it was, somebody posted a 25-1, and I just thought that was odd. And I hit it and I hit it again. You almost hate the double dip here. Maybe you should, you know, take a flyer on, you know, Penn State, you know.
Right.
Something. Or A&M, you know, A&M. If
Yeah.
you can get 12-1 on A&M, it's a good bet. I just feel that Texas is going to play well and come out here. And then I have UCLA winning it all, which is good, Rich, because I haven't seen anybody list UCLA. I've seen Connecticut, I've seen Bama. You know, all the brackets aren't out yet, and then you'll probably see more and more coming up.
By the way, you know, UCLA guards had banged up a little bit. You know what's funny? And I don't know if anyone caught this the other day, but you're pretty astute like I am with this kind of stuff. Did you notice how they kind of glossed over the issues of Alabama and Miller?
They did, because they're a 1 seed. If Alabama was like a 7 seed or an 8 seed, they would be all over it. They really, well, I do give credit. I think Jay Billis mentioned something about
Gumble kind of said, you know,
Gumble said a little bit. Well, hey, listen, you're going to bring that up. CBS, his coverage has been terrible. I got to tell. I've been critical of ESPN a bit, but they do a much better job. I mean, CBS should just mail it in. Somebody posted on Twitter something that was really accurate. They said they just went to the seedings and then your picks.
Yeah.
They didn't do any analysis. I get it. They're pressed a little bit for time. They did do a late night show where they have, I don't know any of the guys' names, but the one guy with the bald head, he's got a radio show. He was a writer.
Some of the guys that
he was pretty good. He was pretty good. You could,
yeah,
you could tell they watch the games, and if you watch the games, you're gonna have a decent opinion. We used to get on my nerves is that, like, you know, I know Vital's sick. I don't want to bury Vital too much, but you know, Vital didn't watch a lot of the games. He didn't watch a lot of the small school games. He's not watching Oral Roberts. He's not, you know, he wasn't, you know, he's barely watching UConn. I mean, let's face it, he just, he's not watching, you know, the Memphis games. He's just, and I get it. You're people that, you know, stretched for time. You're just going on whatever the notes are. But a lot of these guys that are the analysts, after at least they watch, at least they have an opinion, even if it's wrong. At least they're coming from a place of, you know what, this is kind of what I see.
Sure.
And I kind of I'll respect that. I always, you know, call them out for being wrong, as you know, I call myself out for being wrong all the time. But I do think if you're gonna pick, I'm actually hoping, I'm rooting that St. Mary's goes far.
Okay.
I don't know how far they're going to get. You know, I'm hoping they get to Sweet 16, and I'm going to hope my pick of UCLA wins the whole thing. Now, if you talk about odds, I've seen as high as 15, and I've seen as low as plus 1260, plus 1250. I think it's better to bet them to come out of the region
and then win it all.
Yeah, there's some validity to it, but again, search for the best number. You don't want your game to come in and you didn't get a 15-1 when you could have. You're happy that you won, but you're not as happy.
Yeah, sure, because you're shorting yourself, no doubt. All
right, I'll give you something else just real quick along that line. Is a link you sent me earlier about MB versus Joker in the NBA, and I have last year I had Joker to win, and so I got on numerous fights on Twitter especially with Sixer fans, and you know, you don't watch the games, and you know, okay, whatever, like that means anything, but I also had a bias because I had Joker. Well, this year I have Embiid.
There you go.
So everybody got over Kendrick Perkins for saying, and then Barkley came out. You saw that drama about saying, so of course, me being the wise ass on Twitter that I am, I was like, Kendrick Perkins is right. I have no idea if Kendrick Perkins is right. I just want Embiid to win. So self-serving.
That's what it is. Well, you can't serve two masters, right? So you got to take care of yourself first. Hey, listen, it does look, lastly, it does look that Rodgers to the Jets is a done deal, right? He had his wish list of wide receivers. They got rid of Barrios. They just made the move for Lazard. Would you even take a flyer right now? Wait for this to be official. I think it's gonna implode, to be honest. I think just because you stick Rodgers on that team, once he goes 18 of 38 for $165 and 2 picks, the Post, Newsday, the Fan, the Daily, they're gonna crush him, right? So is this more of prisoner of the moment, Rodgers to the Jets, here you go, they're gonna contend for the AFC East? Or does he make them a viable playoff option? Not a Super Bowl contender, but a viable playoff option. Would you take a futures bet right now with with the Jets making the playoffs with Rodgers?
Well, if I'm the Jets, because they played so well defensively last year, really all they were missing was
Quarterback.
Was a quarterback. Because if the game that stands out,
Patriots.
A few games that stand out, but the game in Buffalo stands out. I mean, if they had any kind, I don't want to say serviceable, but if you had a decent quarterback, they'd have another 2 wins. Let's just say it. If they had Rodgers on last year's team, they would have a couple extra wins. What's killing me with Rodgers now is I've been a big Rodgers defender for years because I don't like McCarthy, and I thought McCarthy wasted a lot of Rodgers' years. McCarthy and his staff is just terrible. And you see it, with Dallas, you can blame Dak, but it's McCarthy.
Yep.
And I think he handcuffed Rodgers a lot. But then they lose to Tampa a couple of years ago on very close. They kick the field goal. It's tough call analytically if that was the rate, but I wouldn't give Brady the football back. You know what I mean? It's like when you play against Mahomes, I want as many points as possible, kind of thing. And then the wheels completely fell off.
Hey, Nagy took the ball out of his hands against Chicago.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, it's just I think there's.
I just know if I'm the head coach and I have Rodgers, I'm staying on the podium. Anybody asks me a question, I'm like, well, I've had Rodgers. We're paying the guy $8 billion.
Yeah.
He's the guy. That's why I don't kick. I don't want my kicker making the decision. I want Aaron Rodgers.
That's what they do in Denver.
And I think it's so easy. But if you're asking me for the Jets, I would definitely, I would definitely take a flyer on him. What's worrisome in this is he's older and guys are getting hurt. There's 17 games now. And everybody's getting hurt. Everybody. It doesn't change my decision, but I think you have to keep that in mind because he is a little bit older, and I know he's taking yoga or whatever else he's doing.
Hey, he can take shrooms for all I care. This has Brett Favre written all over it. 3-3.
Rich, for Jet fans, you have to respect that the Jet fans should be all in. The fact that they're just saying, you know what, let's get the guy. We have the defense.
Yeah,
let's go. I respect it. They haven't had haven't had a run.
No,
they had the really good defense. It had Sanchez.
And
what was the run before? The one before that was Parcells, and the one before that was Richard Todd in the rain. If I'm a Jet fan, I'll be like, you know what? Let's get Rod. Screw it. Let's get Rod. Give it all up.
Yeah.
Let's get him for 2 years. The way that they're trying to protect the quarterbacks, he may have another. He may have two good 2 year run.
That's the thing. If not, then maybe you should have made. Should have went after Lamar Jackson. By the way, I like the Richard Todd reference. AJ Dewey with a couple picks in that 82 slop.
If that game was played now, I don't think they played a game.
Wow. I mean, they played in worse conditions.
I don't know. Somebody posted on YouTube when I was waiting through the stupid 2 weeks in between the Super Bowl. I went back and watched a lot of the championship games on YouTube from the 70s and 80s, in the middle of the night again, because I don't sleep. So I'm looking at the game. I'm like, holy shit, that game was close, man. That game was really close.
Go watch. I think it was
the
7.
mud.
Yeah, go watch that 78 Steelers and Houston Oilers game, right? Renfro, tippy toe, tap, tap, tap.
They blow the call in the back of the end zone.
Yeah.
And they never made it back.
And that's when the NFL, a couple years later, remember, they went to replay, they got rid of it, then they brought it back.
Yes.
So
they couldn't do it right. And they thought I almost think people were brain dead 40 years ago. Like it's going to slow the game up. The game's already kind of slow. Nobody cares.
Get it right.
Get the play right. I mean, think about it. It cost Oilers an entire generation because
they were great teams, man.
They were a great team, and once Campbell got hurt, remember Pastorini got hurt, and they trade him and they bring in Stapleton, and it was the end of the team.
Yep.
The team was cooked. I also watched the Charger Bengal game, which was like 400 below. It was like they were playing on Pluto or something. And like what's funny back then? I'm not even thinking of the players. The fans had to go to that game.
Yeah.
Like it's 40 below.
Yeah.
Like, what do they have? Space heaters for the fans?
Well, I know. I think Dan Fouts, to this day, the frostbite with his fingers and whatnot. Yeah,
I believe it. It's just the Jets game in the mud, the Chargers game, and the Fog Bowl, the 3 games that get on my nerves from history more than anything. And people forget. It's funny running Eagles fans now. They made this run. You find out if they're true Eagles fans if they remember the Fog Bowl. If they're over a certain age, remember the Fog Bowl. So many didn't. And I remember the article in the Philly Daily News the next day. I can't remember exactly who wrote it, but they said if this was Al Davis owned this team, they don't play that game. He would have pulled the team off the field.
Yeah, and it's still crazy.
So they were losing that game.
It's still crazy the numbers Cunningham put up.
And remember, they were losing the game. It wasn't like they both played in the Fog. They were losing the game in the Fog rolled in.
Yeah. And you remember too, Bradshaw was calling that game on CBS.
Yes. Because they couldn't see. They couldn't see what was going on.
Yeah. So I think was
it Bradshaw and Lundqvist? I think
it was Vern Lundqvist and Terry Bradshaw. Yeah, look at you. Look at that memory.
That's sick. That's sick that I know that.
Hey, we all keep in that compartmentalized, useless friggin' information. But he is, of course, Shine, the professor, at Professor Shine. He's a great follow on Twitter. He trolls. He's hilarious. He sticks it right at the big boys. And that's what we want. And he was kind enough to join us on a Tuesday edition of Back Your Play from our great friends at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemensbridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. They pay cash for good used items. We're going to give them a lot more pops during the week. Professor, appreciate you jumping on board for a couple moments. We will do it again next weekend. I hope you put a little coin in the said pocket. The dogs are barking, which means they're ready to take the walk. You got to get your bets in. You got the playing game. You got a lot of stuff going on this Tuesday. But
yeah, I'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. We'll hit it again, brother. Appreciate you jumping on board.
No problem. Take care.